What's up, guys? It's Chicago Bears Insight with your host Ian, and today we'll be previewing the preseason Week 3 matchup between the Chicago Bears and the Seattle Seahawks. Now, this week, the Chicago Bears travel to Seattle to take on the Seahawks in their first road game of the preseason, and what's supposed to be a dress rehearsal for the offense and defense, and get situated for the regular season. And in the fourth game, they'll be playing a lot of rookies and guys that will be able to hopefully solidify their spot on the roster and hopefully get signed to the Bears. But today, we're going to be previewing this Friday's game, which is tomorrow. So we're going to jump into some news before we get on to kind of a preview. The Bears, the biggest thing that happened was the Bears signed Santonio Holmes and released Eric Weems, the receiver kick return specialist. Weems was actually, I think as of today, Thursday, Weems actually re-signed with Atlanta, so we'll be facing him again in the regular season. But Santonio Holmes was signed by the Chicago Bears, and I fully expect him to be the number 3 receiver by the end of the preseason and going into the regular season. Now, Josh Morgan has apparently solidified his position to compete for that spot. Not that he will be number 3, but he seems to be the front runner to be the number 3 ahead of people like Michael Spurlock and Chris Williams. So San Antonio Holmes, I fully expect, will be the number 3 receiver simply because he's a veteran and he's kind of more explosive. He's a smaller guy, but I think he will be number 3 because of his experience and his explosiveness, if it's still there, if his injury hasn't brought any downward spirals on his explosiveness. So we'll see. Now, he isn't expected to play this upcoming game against the Seattle because he was signed fairly late last week. I think he was signed Monday, or he was signed in a position where they don't feel comfortable playing him yet. I'd be surprised to see him play, but at the same time, I wouldn't be because he needs the experience. So I don't think he would play in the fourth preseason game because that's made for rookies and undrafted free agents and guys who want to solidify their spot. And Santonio Holmes is too much of a veteran to warrant a game or playing in the fourth preseason game, so we'll see what happens then. But I fully expect him to make the roster at the number 3 receiver. Now, Josh Morgan is the current front runner for the number 3 receiver, so he has to beat him out. And although Josh Morgan looked really good the last few weeks, but because of Holmes' experience and the fact that he's a veteran, I expect him to outperform him, but I wouldn't be surprised if, say, Santonio Holmes got beat out by Josh Morgan and Josh Morgan played at number 3. I think what will happen most likely is that they'll find situations to have Santonio Holmes in the game and situations to have Josh Morgan in the game if they both make the roster, of course. So that's what I fully expect if that happens. It's either Santonio Holmes solidifies his spot as number 3 or they find ways to put them both on the field. Now, some injury news. Kyle Fuller is still out with a foot injury. He is not expected to play Friday, but I wouldn't be surprised if he still did. He has not practiced as of Wednesday, so I wouldn't be surprised if he didn't play. Jordan Mills practiced Wednesday. Chris Conti is expected to play as he has practiced all week, and he's expected to play Friday against the Seahawks. Chris Williams is also practicing again. He is expected to compete for a receiver spot and for a return man. Now, the Bears need a lot of help, obviously, at returner, and I think Chris Williams, if he can play well, is definitely the best choice because of his speed and agility and elusiveness. So I'm really hoping that he can be the guy and that we don't have to settle for someone who's slower. And I'm a big fan of explosive people back there to return. I'm not a big fan of guys like Eric Weems who are more of a power returner. those guys don't. I feel like they don't perform bigger and they don't get as big returns. So I'm hoping that Chris Williams can perform well and he can solidify his spot at returner at least. I mean, if he can make it as a receiver, then obviously we have a big speed threat at receiver, and that would be beneficial going forward because then we can have guys moving up the seam if he plays in the slot, and then have Jeffrey and Marshall on the outside, and we could just pick our matchups and see what the defense gives us and exploit it. Now, some competitions, like I've mentioned, like with receiver. Now, receiver is still open for number 3, but some other competitions at safety. Safety is still open. Chris Conte is expected to play, so we'll get to see a good look at him. This will be a good opportunity to see him because he has the experience, and he's going to be going up against the ones from Seattle for most of the game, through probably half of the game. So we'll just see if he performs well against the ones. Now I expect him to rotate a couple safeties. Ryan Mundy so far has looked really good, so I'm expecting him to start week 1 in regular season, and then the second spot is still up for grabs. I would expect either Chris Conte or Brock Vereen to make that spot, or maybe Adrian Wilson as well. Adrian Wilson is more of a run stopper, so we'll have to see if he can play in coverage against Seattle. We'll see if he can do that, along with Chris Conte and Brock Vereen. Now, Brock Vereen's obviously a rookie, so he's got the tallest hill to climb to get to a roster spot, or not a roster spot, but to start. He will most likely be a second stringer if he doesn't start. But I'm predicting that Chris Conte and Brock Vereen, or not Brock Vereen, but Ryan Mundy will be the starting safeties come this game and in regular season. The only other guy I would imagine starting over Chris Conte would be Brock Vereen, not so much Adrian Wilson, but we'll have to see. Going to the quarterback competition, Jordan Palmer is supposed to start, or not start, but to play after Jay Cutler. Jay Cutler is supposed to play the first half, or at least the first quarter, and Jordan Palmer will be coming in after Jay Cutler, and then you'll be Jimmy Clausen. Now, that doesn't indicate anything in terms of progress. Like Jordan Palmer is now the number 2, and they're looking at him to see if he can solidify it. Now, they're just rotating it. It's gone Jordan Palmer, Jimmy Clausen, and then it was Jimmy Clausen, Jordan Palmer, and then they're just rotating it again. Or at least that's what Coach Mark Trestman said. So we'll see if Jordan Palmer can solidify his spot. Now we're going up against a Seattle defense that has a very good secondary and can stop the run fairly good. So we'll have to see if our quarterbacks can throw really well. Now I'm expecting that if Jay Cutler can play well against the Seattle defense like he has the last 2 preseason games, then I think we're ready for the regular season. The Bears aren't game planning completely for this game, so if we can perform really well against the Seattle secondary, Jay Cutler doesn't go and throw 2 interceptions or even 1 interception, he can move the ball fairly well, and we can keep drives going, get down the field, and just continue to have success on offense with Jay Cutler and the ones, then I think we'll be very well in the regular season, and that the offense will be just as potent as everyone else thinks. Because if we're not game planning and we're able to move down the field on Seattle's defense, which will be very competitive, as they want to prove to the rest of the league that they are not a fluke and that they can perform well even after winning the Super Bowl, and that they're not going to become complacent. So even though it's a preseason game, I expect this to be high level of competition, and that if we can perform well against Seattle's defense, we will at least I think the hype will be real for Chicago Bears offense. Now the defense, speaking of that, will be asked to stop the run, most likely, because of Marshawn Lynch, and if we can stop the run consistently against Seattle's offense, then I would think that we are ready then for the regular season in terms of defense. Now, it is preseason, and I'm saying that we'll be ready and stuff, but that's how I feel because of the talent level of the Seattle's defense and how they just came off the Super Bowl, and Now, I watched their game, Seattle's game against Denver in the first preseason, week 1, and I saw Peyton Manning go on a long drive to score against Seattle's defense, which he couldn't do in the Super Bowl. So I'm hoping that we have somewhat same success. We can maybe get bigger plays. Now, I've always, even before this matchup, I've always believed that this offense with Brandon Marshall and Alshon Jeffrey can beat Seattle's offense or defense. I do think that we are capable because of the big receivers that we have and how many of them we have. Like teams like New Orleans or Denver. Denver's receivers, I believe, were only good because of Peyton Manning. New Orleans only has really Jimmy Graham and Marcus Colston, and Marcus Colston, I don't think is as good as Brandon Marshall or Alshon Jeffrey. Now we have Brandon Marshall, Alshon Jeffrey, like I mentioned. We also have Josh Morgan, who's a big receiver. Now Santonio Holmes and Martellus Bennett and Matt Forte. That's a lot of weapons. And I think that we are more than capable of beating Seattle in a regular season matchup as well, or even a playoff game. So I think we're more than capable of beating Seattle's offense or defense. I keep getting them mixed up for some reason. So I think we're more than capable. I've believed that since we played them in 2012, where we lost, but we lost because the defense was on the field for so long and we just couldn't get off the field. That was Russell Wilson's rookie year. That's when we that was a horrible loss that kind of kept us out of the playoffs. But this is 2014, not 2012, and I think that, and it's a preseason game as well. But I think if we perform well in all aspects of the game, that we will be ready for the regular season, and then we can start looking forward to how good the offense can play and the defense. Now, if they perform bad, then I wouldn't necessarily say it's because we aren't able to beat Seattle. Like Seattle's defense is just too good. I would credit that to some extent that Seattle's defense is really good and we weren't able to move the ball, but also too because we are not game planning, and it's not the end of the world if we don't perform well, but it's also maybe you shouldn't expect too much if we perform bad or perform good. So either way, it's preseason. Gotta enjoy it or hate it either way. So we'll see what happens. I hope we perform well as always. So we'll see what happens. Now, I mentioned it last week about the roster and how it will be trimmed to 75 at some point. Like I said, I kind of made a shot in the dark about when that would happen. I fully expected it would be before week 3 of the preseason, but I think it's, if I had to make another guess, it would be before week 4, simply because it's getting to be about that time. Now, it does have to happen eventually, so I would guess before week 4 and then after week 4 of the preseason, they would ask teams to trim the roster to 53. I fully expect guys like Josh Morgan and Michael Spurlock to make the team. Guys like Chris Williams will make the team as a returner and will in their performance in the preseason. Now, granted, Chris Williams has only had one game in the preseason where he performed well, but he needs to solidify his spot as a returner, not so much as a receiver. Although they're asking for versatility, they always ask for versatility in their guys, so we'll have to see if their competitions are suited and that they can perform that high. Now, I mentioned it earlier how I hope the defense can play well against the run. Now, a big part of how we're going to be able to tell if they can play against the run is how good the linebackers play. And with Lance Briggs and DJ Williams solidified at middle linebacker and outside linebacker, the other spot, strong side linebacker, where Shane McClellan is currently playing, he needs to play well. He performed well last week, but he needs to show that he can be a consistent playmaker. And if he can make some plays this week, then I feel like he can at least perform well in the regular season. I don't expect him to be like a Pro Bowl level, but he needs to be like a Nick Roach where he just performs well. He's a very solid linebacker. Nick Roach was a very solid outside linebacker, and that if he can perform up to that level, I feel like we can win some games, and he doesn't have to be such a liability. Now he's a lot more athletic than Nick Roach, and he can pass rush a little bit better. So I'm hoping that Shane McClellan can perform just as good or better. And I think he's definitely capable of playing better, but he needs to prove it on the field. And what better way to do that than against the Seattle Seahawks, who have one of the best running teams in the league. And I think I read a thing where they ran the ball more than 60% of the time. So Russell Wilson is definitely not going to pass a lot. Now, it is preseason. They might ask Russell Wilson to throw a little bit more, but I would doubt it because they don't want to get him injured. And so we'll see what happens. And I hope the run defense can perform well. This is definitely a good test for them. Also, it's also a good test in the secondary where Charles Tillman and Tim Jennings are older and they'll have to be playing against younger receivers. So we'll see how well they perform. And Tim Jennings is also expected to play inside at nickel in the slot. So now, because Kyle Fuller is still out, I'm not really sure who will be playing outside when they go to a nickel package. I would expect Kelvin Hayden. That would be the most logical choice. But because Kyle Fuller is still out, he won't be able to get reps against the Seattle Seahawks, which really sucks because he needs all the reps he can get, especially if they are going to start him when they go to a nickel package. They are going to have Charles Tillman and Kyle Fuller on the outside, and then Tim Jennings playing slot. So it really sucks that he won't be playing. There is a possibility he might play, but I would say a 95% chance he won't. So, but I've read that there is a chance he could play, but I highly doubt it. So we'll see what happens. I'm looking forward to this game. This is definitely like I'm hyping this game up as if we can perform well, I think we'll be really ready for the regular season. I think this is a true and great test. We're going to Seattle. We're playing against the Super Bowl champions, and I really am looking forward to this matchup. I think this will be a good way to gauge where we are, and I'm really excited to see if this Bears team can beat Seattle like I think we can, even in the preseason game. And I'm really looking forward to the regular season, and this is going to be as close as we're going to get to a regular season game. So I'm really looking forward to this matchup, like I've stated before. So that's going to wrap it up, guys. Go follow me on Twitter at ShyBearsInsight for all the Chicago Bears and NFL news. And I will see you guys for the recap video for the Chicago Bears and the Seattle Seahawks Week 3 preseason matchup. Thanks for watching and have a great day.